PFDJ National Charter, adopted by the Third Congress of the EPLF PFDJ NACFA from February the 10th to the 16th, 1994. Introduction. 1. Nation building and nationalism in Eritrea. 2. Our vision of a future Eritrea. The 6 basic goals, the 6 guiding principles. The basis of our political programs. 1. Building a democratic political system. 2. Building an economy that meets the needs of our people. 3. Developing a national culture. 4. Equitable distribution of social services. 5. Respecting equal rights. 6. Guaranteeing national security and defense. 7. Establishing regional and international cooperation. Organizational principles. 1. A broad-based movement. 2. A participatory movement with lively internal democracy. 3. Qualified, representative and accountable leadership subject to periodic change. 4. Separation of the movement and its activities from government. 5. Encouragement of it in cooperation with people's associations. 6. A dynamic organizational structure rooted in the people. Introduction. Today, Eritrea finds itself on the verge of a new chapter in its history. For 50 years, the country and its people suffered under colonial rule. The colossal task of ridding itself of this colonial rule and establishing national independence and dignity has been achieved. For the first time, the people of Eritrea have become masters of their own country and hold their future in their own hands. What appeared to many as a dream has now become a reality. We fought against enemies who had the superior capacity with meager outside support, relying on our people in own capacity, with heavy sacrifices, tremendous effort, vigilance, political maturity, and ingenuity. Our struggle was not limited to combating the enemy. We laid the proper foundation for an independent country. Finally, in a referendum in which the entire population consciously and enthusiastically participated, 99.8% voted for national independence. It would be no exaggeration to claim that such an achievement has few equals in the history of liberation movements. It is a testimony to, and a manifestation of the political maturity of the people of Eritrea and its leadership. Achieving national independence and sovereignty is the conclusion of an important chapter in the history of the people of Eritrea, yet at the same time, the beginning of a new chapter. Today, the people of Eritrea face the task of building a peaceful, just, and prosperous society, a task which is more difficult and more complicated than the past task of achieving independence. Unless peace, justice, and prosperity prevail in Eritrea, the independence we won with heavy sacrifices will be meaningless. That is to say, if we do not lift people out of poverty and deprivation, safeguard their human and democratic rights, and improve their material, cultural, and spiritual lives, attaining independence will not amount to anything. We must pass on to our children a country that is free from war and conflict, a country of which they can be proud, a country in which independence, peace, and prosperity prevail. The struggle to build a better future for the people of Eritrea starts in earnest after independence. We, the generation that brought about independence, have shouldered the historic responsibility to pass on to future generations the basic elements for a modern and just society. The current transitional stage presents simultaneously both a historic responsibility and a challenge. The actions we take and the choices we make at this historical juncture represent a rare opportunity, the proper use of which is a heavy responsibility and thus, a big historical challenge. The main and timely question is thus, is the generation that successfully concluded the independence struggle equal to this historic task? The answer is it must be. Otherwise, all our generation's struggles and contributions to Eritrea and its people would have been to no avail. It would mean the mission is only half complete. The mission must be concluded by building an independent and modern Eritrea. This is the mandate of our country, of our people, and our martyrs. That the building of peace and development is more difficult and more complicated than winning war has been repeatedly proved. Several African and other countries which started with high hopes following their attainment of independence or conclusion of victorious revolutions are cases in point. The experience of such countries has been the replacement of old exploiters by new ones, deterioration of national economies, and people's standard of living, all experiences of failure. To repeat such sad experiences would amount to making all our costs and sacrifices worthless and condemning ourselves and future generations to further wars and suffering. However, we are not condemned to repeat such mistakes. We can bring lasting peace, justice, and prosperity to our Eritrea. We owe it to ourselves, to our martyrs, and to our children to make Eritrea a country to be proud of and worthy of the tremendous sacrifices we paid for its independence. Good intention alone, however, is not sufficient. Other countries failed, not for want of goodwill. To bring about independence, we needed political programs, military strategies, and strong and mature organizations. Similarly, to build a modern and just society, we need a sustainable political program based on clear principles and an effective, broad-based, organizational structure to enable the full participation of everyone. The purpose of this document, a national charter for Eritrea, is therefore, first, to clarify the basic guidelines needed for our future national and democratic journey. Second, to identify a political program which can effectively guide a broad-based national and democratic movement. And third, to develop the appropriate organizational procedures and basic principles for such a political program. A national charter for Eritrea is not copied from books or from the charters of other countries. It starts from the realities of our country and society, and from our rich experience. It does not borrow wholesale any analyses or formulas that are fashionable in today's world either. Rather, by critically examining all ideas and relating them with the realities of our society and our experience, the purpose is to chart an independent line that works. Our charter is not a dogmatic, closed, and dry document. It is open to new ideas and experiences. It is a dynamic document that develops and is enriched through practical experience. Because the document describes our vision and ideals, it should not be taken as something that will be implemented in a short period, even within a few years. It is something that will be implemented stage by stage over a long period of time. It is a document of general principles and goals that guides our journey, directing us to our destination and what we need to do to reach that destination. PFDJ National Charter adopted by the Third Congress of the EPLF, PFDJ. NACFA on February the 10th to the 16th of 1994. Article 1. Nation Building and Nationalism in Eritrea. Even though Eritrea and its current borders was established by Italian colonialism, it is important to remember that the history of its people did not start with Italian colonization. The people of Eritrea had their own history and civilization, their own laws, and administrative systems before colonialism. They had political, economic, social, and cultural lives of their own. Successive colonial rulers over the years did influence Eritrea's life and administrative systems, but did not destroy them. The colonizers have left behind traces of their legacies. At the same time, Eritrean tradition, though it underwent changes and adjustments, has maintained the basic characteristics, which have been passed down through the generations. Thus, to fully understand our country's current situation and plan for the future, it is critical to understand the internal dynamics of Eritrean society, in addition to the legacies of the various colonizers. Italian colonialism lasted over 50 years. It did not completely change Eritrean society, nor was its influence evenly distributed. However, its lasting impact on the history of Eritrea cannot be denied. Italian colonialism, as was true of all European colonialisms, forcefully established Eritrea's boundaries, and by bringing under one administration all peoples within these boundaries, opened up a new chapter in the history of Eritrea. Seeing Italian skills but mainly relying on Eritrean human and material resources, Italian colonialism built cities and ports, highways and railroads, factories, and modem farms. It introduced conscription. Further, it created a condition where Eritrean citizens from all corners of the country were introduced to each other and gained common experiences. The extent of colonial influence may have varied from place to place, some might not have been touched, but the ever-expanding interaction among Eritreans, combined with their reaction to increasing Italian oppression and racism, sowed the seeds of Eritrean national consciousness. The establishment of the first modern Eritrean political association, Maper Fikri Hager, love of one's country, at the conclusion of the Italian colonial era and the coming of the British, is a clear testimony to national consciousness. The British military administration in Eritrea was temporary and short-term in nature and thus has a limited legacy. Although the BMA expanded educational opportunities and allowed political activities and freedom of expression through divide and rule tactics, it strove to create division among the people of Eritrea. Further, it laid the ground for the eventual Ethio-American plot to deny the people of Eritrea their right to self-determination. The British administration also destroyed several Eritrean economic establishments and some infrastructure. During British rule, the then infant Eritrean nationalist movement could neither withstand the conspiracy hatched against Eritrea nor save itself from divisiveness. Consequently, what followed was Ethiopian colonial rule whose cruelty had no equal in the history of Eritrea. In the beginning, Ethiopian colonialism in Eritrea was neither direct nor overt. This was because the internal, as well as external conditions in Eritrea, were not conducive to direct Ethiopian rule. It was under the pretext of the United States-initiated United Nations Resolution on Federation in 1952 that Ethiopian rule started. The Federation period, 1952 to 1962, witnessed the erosion of Eritrea's internal independence, progressive expansionism of Ethiopian rule, and the growth of Eritrean resistance. One of the significant accomplishments of this period was the visible expansion of our national struggle, which had started in the 40s, the emergence of workers' and students' movements, and especially the establishment and expansion of the Eritrean liberation movement, PFDJ. Colonial Ethiopia, by all standards, was more backward than Eritrea. Consequently, there was nothing that Ethiopia constructed or improved in Eritrea, it only destroyed. Through crude repressive measures, it systematically undermined Eritrean political, economic, social, and cultural life. It uprooted the then budding political democracy in Eritrea and brought a period of a cruel dictatorship. By destroying Eritrea's economy and infrastructure, Ethiopia turned Eritrea's clock back 30 to 40 years. The worst, most difficult and intractable colonial legacy that Ethiopia left, however, was the backward and corrupt culture of its ruling class. Certain traits in the Eritrean culture, of which we were proud, such as discipline, honesty, strong work ethic, initiative, inventiveness, self-sufficiency, and loathing of dependency gave way to bribery, cheating, laziness, and dependency on handouts during Ethiopian colonial rule, especially in the urban area. Ethiopia was able to keep the more developed and advanced country, Eritrea, under the yoke of its rule for 40 years, mainly due to the support of big world powers, firstly the United States and later, the Soviet Union. Tremendous support Ethiopia received prolonged Ethiopian colonial rule and the suffering of the people of Eritrea and made the price of independence much higher than it would otherwise have been. This limitless support for Ethiopia, on the one hand, and the isolation of the Eritrean Revolution, on the other, helped us look inwards, to the resources of our country and our people, and encouraged inventiveness and ingenuity in all fields. It is no exaggeration to state that this resulted in the establishment of one of the world's most developed liberation struggles, which has greatly contributed to Eritrea's national reconstruction. The liberation struggle of Eritrea was not advanced right at the beginning. When in 1961 the Eritrean Liberation Front, EPLF, began the armed struggle, it did reflect the desire of the people of Eritrea. However, the EPLF's outlook and approach were not conducive to the unity of Eritrea's people, nor were they helpful to nation building and to the success of the struggle. The EPLF's major shortcoming was that it submerged itself in divisions in the Eritrean society along ethnic, religious and regional lines, and fomented such divisions. Instead of working to mobilize all Eritreans, there have been tremendous political developments in Eritrea since then, yet the tendency to exploit differences in the Eritrean population for narrow political gains and to play on narrow-minded attitudes has not finally disappeared from Eritrean politics. The ones who employed this kind of divisive politics to the maximum were the Ethiopian rulers. Realizing that they could not defeat the Eritrean people with bullets and firepower, they strove, until the day of their demise, to sow discord among the people of Eritrea, pitting one section against another. In the 60s they burnt mosques while sparing churches. Later, they tried to appear to be advocates for the lowlanders. They relentlessly practiced their divisive politics even at the lowest social level, creating conflicts between villages and even among people within a village. The Eritrean Liberation Movement, and in particular the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF, managed to thwart the intrigues of the Ethiopians and their Eritrean collaborators by cultivating nationalism and unity among the Eritrean people. The EPLF created a form of struggle in which all Eritreans who opposed the colonial rule and were desirous of independence could participate regardless of their religion, language, ethnicity, class, and gender. The EPLF became a melting pot for hundreds and thousands of Eritreans who came from rural and urban areas, from highland and lowland regions, and from the most marginalized localities. It enhanced Eritrean nationalism and prepared the ground for national unity, overriding all divisive and narrow-minded attitudes. It taught and practiced the equality of all citizens. In all its policies and actions, the EPLF cultivated nationalism and unity of the people of Eritrea. Through a century-old history of the colonial experience, and primarily from their own historical activities, the people of Eritrea have become one people and one country, composed of several ethnic and linguistic groups, and several beliefs and cultures. The journey of nation building is long and complicated. Even though the bases of Eritrean nationalism have been firmly established through our long liberation struggle, it has yet to be concluded. The population of Eritrea, whose unity is rooted in a long tradition of peaceful and harmonious coexistence, and was reinforced by the long struggle, is one of the most unified populations among societies with similar social structures. Because of this unity, victory was achieved, and peace and stability now prevail in independent Eritrea. And the establishment of Eritrea's government reflects and reinforces this broad-based unity. We have briefly explored the 100-year history of the people of Eritrea. Over that century, the natural history of the people of Eritrea was interrupted by colonialism. Eritreans experienced colonial oppression, including the worst kind of fascistic racism. Unlike other similarly colonized peoples, Eritreans were denied their right to independence. Further, while similarly oppressed, peoples who conducted liberation struggles were obtaining wide international support. The people of Eritrea were obliged to conduct their struggle single-handedly against an internationally supported enemy. This struggle was written off by many observers as futile and foolhardy. The people of Eritrea emerged victorious from this extremely difficult test. The heavy firepower did not weaken them. Instead, it hardened them and strengthened their determination. They earned Eritrea's independence and sovereignty intact and unconditionally. In several countries where national independence struggles were conducted, conflicts, and sometimes civil war and independence have followed. In Eritrea, however, thanks to the strong national unity built through the struggle and mature political handling, peace and stability prevailed. A broad-based, popularly supported government has been established for a transitional period. Transitions are usually difficult but Eritrea is expeditiously finding solutions to the problems faced during this period. With high hopes, the country is poised in the direction of the more difficult and bigger historical challenge of building a modern and stable society. To say that the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF, was the biggest contributor to the remarkable victory of the people of Eritrea is merely to state a historical fact. As was already mentioned, the Eritrean armed struggle was in a state of crisis and thus on the verge of defeat in the late 60s and early 70s. What gave the struggle new life was the establishment of the EPLF. It was the EPLF that maintained the revolution by challenging and withstanding Soviet-backed military campaigns of the biggest army in Black Africa, achieved the final historic military victory, established a broad national front and made popular participation a reality, organized a referendum so that independence was the outcome of the free and legal choice of the people of Eritrea and not of a military victory alone, and established a solid foundation for Eritrea's independence and its international relation. The EPLF has successfully achieved the basic goals with which it started: independence and peace for Eritrea. As a liberation front, it has accomplished its mission with resounding success. The EPLF, however, has never viewed independence as an end in itself, but rather as a precondition for building a democratic and modern society in which justice and prosperity prevail. Given the fact that the EPLF is a political organization embracing all sections of the Eritrean population and brings unity and rich experience, it has the capacity to make a great contribution to the development of Eritrea. However, this new chapter and the pending new challenges demand new organizational structures, new mechanisms, and directions. This new structure cannot be divorced from the rich experience of the past. It must build upon the strong foundation already established by the EPLF. It must inherit and improve the exemplary policies and practices gained from past experience, and on the other hand, avoid past and existing weaknesses and shortcomings. It must develop political programs, organizational structures, and work procedures that are appropriate to the new tasks in this new chapter. The new structure must take into account the nature of our society and its developmental stage, and lessons gained from our past experience as well as the experiences of the Third World. For this new structure to be constructive and become equal to the tasks of the new phase, it must be a broad-based movement, embracing all patriotic and democratic Eritreans, as opposed to a narrow-based party. Most EPLF members have a strong commitment to the progress of the country for whose independence they sacrifice dearly, and to the improvement of the living conditions of oppressed sectors of Eritrea's population. Thus it is only natural that they become active players in the movement, as do others who love the country and its people but have been outside the EPLF due to the way the liberation struggle developed, or for other reasons. During this new phase of nation building, political, economic, social and cultural, and we are embarking on a broad-based political movement to effectively guide our future journey. We need to clarify our basic objectives and the means by which to achieve them. We were victorious in spite of all the difficulties and dangers, because as a liberation movement and a people, we had clarity and a common vision of the goals of independence and peace. Today too, we must have a vision of future Eritrea and its people, and it is of utmost importance that such a vision enters into the hearts and minds of all Eritreans so that they can organize and strive for its realization. Our vision of a future Eritrea. What is it that we as a nation and people desire at this stage? As we converted yesterday's dreams of peace and independence into reality, what are today's dreams that we desire to convert into reality? In short, what is our vision? Our vision is for Eritrea to become a country where peace, justice, democracy, and prosperity prevail. Our vision is to eliminate hunger, poverty, and illiteracy from Eritrea. Our vision is for Eritrea to preserve its identity and uniqueness, develop a commitment to family and community care, and by advancing economically, educationally, and technologically, find itself among the developed countries. Our vision is for Eritrean society to be known for harmony among its different sectors, gender equality, love of country, humanity, discipline, hard work and love for knowledge, respect for law and order, independence, and inventiveness. Our vision is to perform miracles in peaceful nation building as we did in a war of liberation. Our vision can be summarized into 6 basic goals. 1. National harmony. For the people of Eritrea to live in harmony, peace, and stability, with no distinction along with regional, ethnic, linguistic, religious, gender, or class lines. 2. Political democracy. For the people of Eritrea to be active participants and become decision makers in the administration and conduct of their lives and of their country, with their rights guaranteed by law and in practice. 3. Economic and social development. For Eritrea to progress socially and economically in the areas of education, technology, and the standard of living. 4. Social justice, economic and social democracy. Equitable distribution of wealth, services and opportunities, and special attention to be paid to the most disadvantaged sections of society. 5. Cultural revival. Drawing on our rich cultural heritage and on the progressive values we developed during the liberation struggle, to develop an Eritrean culture characterized by a love of country, respect for humanity, solidarity between men and women, love of truth and justice, respect for the law, hard work, self-confidence, self-reliance, open-mindedness, and inventiveness. 6. Regional and international cooperation. For Eritrea to become a respected member of the international community, by coexisting in harmony and cooperation with its neighbors and by contributing, to the extent of its capability, to regional and global peace, security, and development. This is our new dream and vision. It is not an easy task that can be accomplished tomorrow or the day after. There is no doubt that it will require time, strong commitment, hard work, and continuous creativity. But there is no doubt either that it can become a reality. As we set forth to carry out our new mission, we can learn many lessons from the rich experience of our liberation struggle. It is important to consult our experience and draw relevant lessons so that the future journey of our country and our people do not proceed haphazardly. The basic principles and views, which were instrumental for our victory, can still serve well as a foundation for nation building and for enhancing justice and prosperity. The 6 basic principles which can serve as guidelines for our activities are: national unity, active public participation, the human element, linkage between national and social struggles, self-reliance, and finally, a strong relationship between people and leadership. Let us examine each of them. 7. National unity. Eritrea would not have attained independence if we had not conducted our struggle, rejecting all sectarian, divisive attitudes and activities, believing in the unity of Eritrea and its people and uniting the latter for one goal. At the beginning, in the 1960s, our armed liberation struggle was in a state of confusion and decline, and had reached the verge of defeat because it lacked leadership and organizational form. But the struggle overcame this danger because it was eventually guided by a national political line and the leadership, and was able to organize hundreds of thousands of Eritreans who came from all over the country, regardless of their ethnic or social backgrounds, and finally achieved victory. Now also unity, equality, and participation of all sections of the Eritrean society should be the basis of all our programs, unless all sections of our society are active participants in the political, economic, social, and cultural lives of their country, and if government is perceived as close to some but remote to others, let alone to build and develop Eritrea, we will not be able to preserve the peace and the stability we now have. Thanks to the long experience and the sacrifices made, independent Eritrea now has national unity with which to start. But, like everything, in order not to lose the impetus, it is essential to preserve and enhance that unity. During peacetime, unlike in wartime, it is evident that certain tendencies and thoughts that gradually weaken unity may emerge. We have to take such tendencies seriously and combat them. Beyond this, because nationhood is a long, complicated historical process with political, economic, social, and cultural aspects to it, and as in other third world countries, this process is not yet concluded. We should consider the development and strengthening of Eritrean nationalism and the unity of its people as the major tasks we must undertake. For national unity to develop, it requires institutional guarantees. Thus, it is primarily necessary to build a national government that ensures unity and equality of the people of Eritrea, rejects all divisive attitudes and activities, place national interest above everything else, and enables the participation of all sectors of Eritrean society. All political establishments must be built on a national basis, and all sectarian political tendencies must be categorically rejected. All forms of discrimination and domination, including ethnic and regional, must also be rejected. The diverse cultures of Eritrea should be a source of power and unity. The national system should be secular, separate from religion, yet respectful of the equality of religions. In short, nationhood must be the basis of all political institutions and policies. 8. Active participation of the people. Our liberation struggle succeeded because it was founded on people. Had there not been a strong connection between the liberation movement and the people, the struggle would not have survived, let alone succeeded. The support was effective because it came in an organized form. The slogan that the EPLF used right from the beginning, politicize, organize, and arm the masses, is one of the basic foundations of the victory achieved by the people of Eritrea. Today too, active and organized participation of the people, based on political consciousness, is a basic condition for the success of the current journey. When we say people's participation, we do not mean merely voting in occasional elections. Rather, we mean that the people should participate in all decisions that touch their lives and their country, from the inception to the implementation of ideas. Without public participation, there cannot be development. It is vital for people to participate in all stages of development projects, from planning to implementation and assessment. However, participation cannot be effective unless people are organized. Thus, not only should people have the right to establish organizations, they should also be encouraged and assisted to do so. 9. Decisive role of the human factor. The secret of our victory in the struggle was found in the dedicated fighter who was committed to one goal. It was this selfless individual who made it all possible, beating all odds, defeating Ethiopian colonialism and its powerful backers. In the Eritreans' experience of the struggle, is confirmation that a conscious and determined human being, committed to a just cause, is stronger than steel and brute force. The decisiveness of the role of the human element, however, was not limited to the war. In building an economy too, the most decisive factor is human resources, not natural or capital resources, or foreign aid and investments. There are countries with limited natural resources that have reached high levels of development. By contrast, there are several countries with abundant natural endowments, which have remained backward and still cannot even feed their people. What we understand from our own experiences, as well as those of others, are that in all our programs and activities, we must realize that the decisive role of the human factor. Even though we need foreign aid and investment, it is primarily the human aspects by which we build Eritrea: strong will, diligence, efficiency, work ethic, discipline, ability and skills, and inventiveness. Just as the liberation of Eritrea would have been impossible without committed people, similarly the prosperity and modernization of Eritrea is also unthinkable without them. Thus, the human element should be accorded a central position in our development strategies. These strategies must primarily be people-oriented. They should aim at meeting the material and spiritual needs of people. To emphasize the importance of the human element, we should put as many resources as possible into human development, education, training, health, and so on. In general, we must strive to build a people-oriented society in which every Eritrean can develop his/her capacity, free from oppression, fear, poverty, and ignorance. 10. Relationship between national and social struggles. Struggle for social justice. Our experience has proved that the struggle for independence and the struggle for a better future cannot be separate. We remember that in the initial stages when our struggle lacked progressive programs, its continuity was even in doubt, let alone making any advances. If our struggle had not been linked to the social struggle, reflecting people's interests, it would not have resulted in victory. Be it during a liberation struggle or national development, it is impossible to advance without the participation of the people. For people to sustain participation, however, there must be programs that help them bring about real changes in their lives. Mere political campaign promises are not sufficient. Only when people actually see that the political movement or government works in their interest, only when they see that promises are kept, do they become enthusiastic participants in programs. Such was the experience of our revolution with respect to people's participation, because they saw modern educational and health services provided and development projects initiated, based on locally available materials and the involvement of people. Progressive social philosophies and programs were another of the main characteristics of our liberation struggle. The establishment of people's assemblies and associations, initiation of development projects, expansion of social services, changes in the conditions of Eritrean women in general, the awakening of the rural population, were all witnesses to such policies. Further, the liberation struggle possessed a strong social consciousness characterized by a love of truth and justice, support for the oppressed, intolerance of oppression, respect for human rights and equality, and awareness of people's daily problems. The philosophy that guided these programs is the philosophy of social justice. Social justice is a very broad and flexible concept open to different interpretations. However, for us, based on our actual experience, social justice means narrowing the gap between the haves and have-nots, ensuring that all people have their fair share of the national wealth, and can participate in the political, social and cultural life of the country, to creating balanced development, respecting human rights, and advancing democracy. To be meaningful and have a stable foundation, political democracy must be accompanied by economic and social democracy. As in the past, Eritreans are convinced that in the absence of justice, neither stability nor prosperity is attainable. Thus, in order to motivate the people of Eritrea to strive for social justice and development with all their might, we should not limit ourselves to talking and teaching about social justice. The movement must provide the most oppressed sections of our society with the means to participate in planning a better future as a matter of priority. 11. Self-reliance. This is another of the foundations for the victory attained by our liberation struggle. If we had not relied on our own abilities, both in developing our principles and in practice, we would certainly not have succeeded. Self-reliance in all fields, political, economic, and cultural, is a basic principle. Politically, it means to follow an independent line and give priority to internal conditions. Economically, to rely on internal capabilities and develop internal capacities. And culturally, to have self-confidence and develop one's own cultural heritage. Self-reliance does not mean isolating oneself from the international community. It only means being as independent and self-confident as a player as possible in the international community. The history of our liberation struggle is the history of self-reliance. We succeeded because we planned according to our own experience and conditions, without copying anybody else's political models, foreign policies, or military strategies. We dealt with the problems we faced in our daily lives and programs, not expecting solutions from outside experts. This proud tradition, which has been the basis of our victory, must continue. In matters of democracy and economic development, we must chart our own programs which work for our conditions. Going to the market for ideas in vogue can only make us victims of the vagaries of fashion. Although we need outside expertise and experts, we have to rely on our own abilities and experts and give priority to developing our own capabilities and expertise. We need to challenge the tendency to worship everything foreign and avoid imitation of foreigners as observed in some sections of our society, especially among our youth. 12. A strong relationship between people and leadership. We have learned from bitter and difficult experience that honest and mature leadership is another of the decisive factors in attaining victory. If we had not had qualified and effective leadership that could mobilize our limited and weak resources, a leadership that could turn resilient and committed people and fighters into an impregnable force through proper organization and guidance, we definitely would not have won. Here, when we say leadership, it should be evident that we are referring not only to the higher executive body but in a broader sense, to the organized broad political force that provides leadership. In our experience, in addition to the top leaders, decisive leadership roles were also played by the platoon leaders who led their comrades into the battle, and by the middle-level leadership and lower cadres who actually carried out the organization's guidelines and policies and who were reinforced by the feedback they received from the people and the experience they gained. Our own experience, as well as those of others, confirms that it is impossible to provide proper leadership by leaders residing in foreign lands, or even when residing inside the country, if they are isolated from the people. It is because we lived among the people during our struggle, leading their lifestyle, sometimes even more simply than they, understanding their thinking, demonstrating interest in and striving to solve their problems, and winning their hearts and minds, that we were able to make them active participants in the struggle and lead them to victory. Today also, in order to awaken the efforts and creativity of our people, who performed miracles in the past, and direct them to build the Eritrea we desire, we must preserve and strengthen our relationship with the people, not only in thought and spirit but also through our daily physical presence among them. We know of several revolutionary movements that started in rural areas and achieved victory at the cost of and through the support of the rural sector. Once they entered the city, they directed their whole attention to solving pressing city problems, ignoring the plight of the majority rural population that sustained them, thus fulfilling the adage, out of sight, out of mind. In the final analysis, they lost the support of both the rural and urban sectors and failed. To avoid such a failure, our leadership and cadres at all levels, and the activities of the government and the political movement must spread to all corners of the country, including those distant areas which until recently served as our base areas and headquarters, to continue the proud leadership tradition of our liberation struggle and prevent regression. Leaders must be free from corruption, refrain from misuse of power, be teachers and humble servants, become positive role models, continuously learn and update skills, and be accountable at all times. Our experience is a living testimony to the need for collective leadership, yet clearly defined individual responsibilities and procedures, respect for the law and adherence to the legality of actions. Finally, our own experience, as well as those of others, also confirm that periodic change of leadership and infusion of new blood into leadership are important for a smooth transition and for a healthy political life. Thus, in this new phase, by clarifying the duties and obligations of leaders in its broader sense, by introducing clearly defined accountability procedures, by ensuring the proper functioning of institutions at all levels, by constitutionally defining the duration of stay in leadership positions, we must guarantee qualified, accountable and democratic leadership. The above outlined thoughts constitute our vision and our fundamental objectives. Further, they are basic principles to guide us to reach targets. They describe our political thoughts and philosophy. Our philosophy is the philosophy of pragmatism, social justice, and humanism. It is based on the practical realities of life, on the realities of Eritrean society. It gives more priority to knowledge gained from the experiences of other societies than from textbooks. It is a philosophy that assesses the validity of an idea on the basis of its practical application. We in Eritrea are committed to building nation building and strengthening the unity of our people. We are committed to economic growth, but in conjunction with social justice and the protection of the natural environment. We stand for modernization based on national identity and culture. The goal we aim for is an Eritrea which satisfies the material and spiritual needs of its people, individually and collectively, in a climate of peace.